Welcome back. We have a fun podcast for all of you today. We're stepping away from some of the heavy lifting that we've been dealing with lately, and we're going to be focusing on something that all of you will appreciate, especially the time of year. And the title of today's show is Your Listing a Haunted House? Nine surefire ways to spook off your buyers.
That's right. Is your listing a haunted house? Are you spooking your buyers? Well, we're going to go over some possibilities for you to avoid. Welcome to the haunted house of real estate horrors. In the spirit of Halloween, let's explore all the spooktacular ways you can send buyers running for the hills, or should we say, fleeing from your listing. Want to ensure buyers get goosebumps and not in a good way? Well, follow these frightful tips. In other words, make sure you're not on track for any of the negative feedback that will result from these 9 listing mistakes.
Now, if you can't tell already, Julie and I were needing a break from the usual podcast fare. So this is intentionally going to be hopefully a little bit more fun for everyone, especially your dear podcast presenters, because we needed a little sidestep.
Exactly.
And if you want the notes from today's podcast, as with every podcast, just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. harrisrealestatedaily.com is our daily newsletter exclusively for podcast fans. And you can just subscribe easily by going over to harrisrealestatedaily.com. Drop in your email address. It costs you nothing. But remember, you have to confirm you want the subscription. So after you drop in your email address, pop right over to your email, confirm that you want the subscription. You're off to the races. You can use our notes for social media posts. And frankly, today's show would be great for that. Your own training, maybe your agents or your brokerage, whatever you want to use it for, especially for educating yourself or in the case of today's show, having fun. So harrisrealestatedaily.com. Make sure you do that ASAP. If you've not already joined, it costs you nothing. And you'll be glad you did, because you'll be on Insider for today's podcast and all of our other podcasts as well, because we do provide a lot of exclusive content just for podcast subscribers. Joy, point number 1.
Yes, we have at least 9 ways to scare buyers right out of your listings. Number 1, creepy critters. Pet tarantula, snake, or shark. Or fill in the blank. Nothing says welcome home like a pet tarantula creeping in the corner or a python slithering in the tank. And don't forget the shark swimming ominously in the living room aquarium. Here's your spooky scenario. Picture a potential buyer turning the corner and meeting 8-legged Mr. Fluffy. Definitely not the best way to say dream home. So here's your trick-or-treat tip. Have your creepy, especially creepy pets, take a vacation during showings unless you want to give your buyers nightmares.
Now, you're going to think that we are giving you extreme examples, but we are not. These are actual things that we personally experienced selling real estate, and usually at this point,
our coaches.
Our coaching clients were our coaches, right? And Julie has a fun story where was it a listing you had where you're a listing agent, a coaching client, there was a mini horse or something?
What are they called? An emotional support pony.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Well, okay. So this was a coach, and my heart goes out to her because I think this was actually her first listing. She was in California, younger agent, and she had this listing. It was a pretty hot market, but it wasn't selling. And I asked her, "What's the feedback been?" Well, a lot of agents in California don't get feedback that often, so she started asking. And agent after agent who had shown it kept saying things like, "Shows like a zoo, smells a little gamey." And she's like, she hadn't been there in a while, okay? So she investigated, and as it turns out, the house was mostly vacant, but the seller was keeping, yes, you guessed it, a pony in the house. And the comments were, it showed a little bit, stinky.
And all of you have had examples like that.
That's a real thing, by the way.
Julie, we have so many fun stories we could tell. I don't know. I just scanned your notes. How about the listing that we took when we were in New Albany? And we were walking.
Yes.
Can I? If I
you
talk,
can tell. Well, I'm sure that we'll wander into lots of stories, and don't forget my cat story about the cats that I let in the house that didn't belong there.
Oh, Can we tell the blood on the carpet story?
Go ahead. It's the Halloween version.
All right, okay, so we're going to get to our next one. It's actually haunting smells. But before we get there, we're going to give you point number 1A. This is a true story. So Julie and I are walking through. I remember the price of the house. It was $452,000.
100% remember this.
Because we read
it
each
stays
other.
with you.
Yeah, it does. This is a beautiful brick house. It was, a newer home. The house was vacant. There was a divorce. The seller had actually moved to another house in the community. I'm not sure really what happened to the wife, and you'll understand why we didn't ask here in a second. So we're walking through this house, and it's a decent sized house, 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath scenario. And we go upstairs to one of the bedrooms, and it's the master bedroom, and it had tan carpet. And there was a massive, nasty-looking blood stain right in the middle of the freaking room. And the blood, I'm telling you guys, I don't mean to gross you out, but let's just go with as large as you can imagine, to the point where we had to walk around it, and this was a big room. Am I exaggerating at all?
Not at all.
Okay. And the guy who was taking us through, and we won't mention his name, was a doctor. And we asked, and so he was an emergency room doctor, and that's his, so he was used to all kinds of,
Gore.
horribleness, right? Okay. So I asked him jokingly, I said, nice blood stain. I said, just trying to I'm sure it must
Lighten
have.
the awkwardness.
Yeah. I mean, maybe maybe somebody spilled their can of paint. And he goes, oh yeah, that is a blood stain. He said, I'm not sure if I should try to get that out or if I should just replace the carpet. And he was not kidding. Nor did he actually smile. He showed zero facial expressions. Yeah. And Julie and I shut the hell up. And yes, we took the listing. Yes, we had him replace the carpet.
I totally remember that.
And yes, we got it sold.
I remember he had blonde curly hair. And I remember as we were then venturing further into the master bedroom, I don't know if you remember this, there were like claw marks in the side of the woodwork around the door frame.
There were. Yep.
Yeah. So that's when you stop asking questions.
All right, number 2, haunting smells. Well, but you do have to help the seller. And well, I mean, in a case like that, you don't want to give them too much negative feedback. You want to maybe just suggest that they replace the carpet and maybe get some stain work done on the trim.
It's a little scary that he had to ask if he should replace the carpet.
No, he said he actually was going to try to remove. Okay. Now he said remove the stain, but what he really meant was remove the evidence. But that aside, point number 2.
Haunting smells. Is that a phantom in the kitchen or just the lingering scent of last night's garlic festival? Strange smells like overpowering incense, dampness, or mystery odors can send buyers running for the door faster than a haunted house tour. Spooky scenario. Your buyers enter the living room and are greeted by the mysterious smell of... What is that? A mix of wet dog and burnt popcorn? Trick-or-treat tip, purge those ghostly odors and make the air smell fresh and inviting, or at least something less terrifying.
Now, let's talk about that. So if, for example, when Julie and I first got married, this was 33 years ago, we made the mistake of going to the Humane Society to adopt one cat. Okay, when we were there, Julie found a cat she wanted, and I found a cat. Now, we were in our early 20s, and we were super dumb. Let's just be clear about that. So we both found a cat. So we said, okay, well, we're going to go, instead of adopting one cat, we're going to adopt 2 cats. No big deal. Well, it turns out, and I'm not making this up, they were having a 2-for-1 day, and the people working there, the volunteers, were very smart and said, oh, you don't want to break up the cat family. So guess what we walked away with? 4 freaking cats. All right, so we got to the point, when you have 4 cats, and I don't care how cleanly you are, how much you keep the cat boxes changed, and especially if they're inside cats, your house stinks. And you don't smell the stink because you get used to it. It's like when you put on perfume or cologne. Have you noticed after you put it on, like 5 minutes later, you can't even smell it anymore?
But everybody else can.
Everybody else can. So if your seller has pets, it doesn't matter if it's a dog, a pony, a gorilla, we've had that too, or cats, it doesn't matter what it is, you have to assume the house is going to stink to people that don't have the pets. And so you're going to have to really run some, proactive measures to remove the odor. And I have a great solution for you. On Amazon, you can get, it's an ionizer. And it looks very industrial. They're not that expensive. It's a little black box. You can set it for I think 24 hours. And what it does is it sucks all the air that's in the room or the house through this ionizer thing. And it literally removes the bacteria. Because when you're smelling something that smells like farts, guess what you're actually smelling? It smells like farts for a reason. I know that's disgusting, but we're trying to have fun on today's podcast.
Whether they're cat farts or something else.
So you're actually smelling feces in the air.
Ugh.
Okay? And so you have to remove all of that.
But you know what? We talk about that, but it also removes smoke, smells, and curry is something that lingers, different types of cooking and onions and stuff like that.
Any sort of cooking smell. But if the house has been abandoned for a long period of time, the mustiness will be removed.
Or mold.
So definitely use those. But don't go to the point, well, I didn't smell any. If they have a cat, it stinks. This is your go-to.
And they don't know it.
And you're going to lend them, as part of your listing, you're going to lend them the de-stinker that we just described for you. This is another little unique selling proposition for you when you go to list houses, and maybe keep a couple of them in your trunk, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Can you tell we actually sold real estate for a living? Anyway. Okay. Number 3, eerie collections, dolls, clowns, taxidermy. Ever feel like somebody's watching you? Your buyers might when they walk into a room filled with wide-eyed porcelain dolls or a wall of grinning clown masks, not to mention the deer head mounted over the fireplace, glaring down like a spirit from the beyond. Spooky scenario. Imagine the look on a buyer's face as they are surrounded by $50 in matching bonnets. It's a scene right out of a horror movie. So unless your buyers are horror buffs, pack away the Eerie collections before they scare off any potential offers.
Okay, another coaching client story. You guys are going to get a lot of these today. So agent selling real estate in Austin, Texas. Agent sells, basically has been in Austin her entire life. She's used to the mounts. She's used to the deer heads and the things. She's used to people mounting their shotguns and whatever on the walls and throughout the house. This is normal Texas, guys. All right, so Austin has had for a long period of time a slew of buyers coming from California. And if you want to talk about a group of buyers that do not like mounts and shotguns, it's buyers from California. So she was picking up expired listings, and the reason that she was picking them up because the buyers who were buying these very expensive communities were coming from these very blue areas in California and did not like the red aspects of Texas. Hopefully you're following me on all these, trigger words. So she was picking these listings up to sell, and they were beautiful houses. The one thing that was wrong with them is they had the mounts. The people weren't being sensitive to prospective buyers. Julie was her coach. She'd go in there and then with these expired listings and give them a list of the things that had to be fixed to neutralize the house. And sure enough, the homes would sell usually for over asking price. So this is the reason this stuff, we're trying to make you laugh, but it's also very important you understand. You definitely have to be keeping these things in mind.
Exactly. So next we have number 4, Yappy ghouls, herd of ankle-biting dogs. What's scarier than a pack of barking little dogs nipping at your heels the moment that you step through the door? The 4-legged ghouls can turn a house tour into a haunted chase. Picture your buyer entering the front door only to be greeted by a chorus of high-pitched barking and a chorus of chihuahua growls, or fill in the blank of any other number of things. So send your furry friends to a doggy spa for the day. Nobody wants to feel like they're being hunted by a pack of mini werewolves. Like my Halloween tie-in.
Do you want? Is this a good place for you to tell the Diane raccoon story?
Oh my gosh!
You
yes.
got to tell it though.
Well, there were so many Diane stories, but
the raccoon story is the best.
Yes. Okay. Well, I have best and second best. So one of our actual listings, beautiful old brick house in West Beachwold, one of our main areas we used to sell in, and the seller was, let's just say, eccentric. She had a doggy door, which normally, dogs would come in and out of, but she had a raccoon that would routinely come in, if I recall correctly, would have cereal in the kitchen with her for breakfast.
Yep. And so basically what she'd done, and there's no such thing as one raccoon.
No.
There is no one raccoon, okay? There is always a family of raccoons. And so that's what eventually happened. And so these raccoons would use this dog door to go into her house, and she never ran them out. They became like her pets.
Yeah.
And we went over there on a listing appointment once, and sure enough, this raccoon, she named it, this one in particular that was the most friendly with her, would go into the kitchen and she'd hand feed the raccoon. I'm not making this up. This really happened. Okay. And by the way, she didn't have a dog or a cat. I wonder what happened. Ask the raccoon. You guys follow me on this?
No, same house, different story. I remember I had an open house there. Okay. And I was doing paperwork or something at the dining room table, and I hear this crunching noise underneath the table. And there's people walking through, and they're like, gosh, what's under the table? So I look, and there was it wasn't her cat. It was like a neighborhood cat that had caught a blue jay and was just chowing it down underneath the dining room table. There's bird blood everywhere. It was disgusting. And so what do you say? I don't have a script for that. I said something like, well, at least it's in the dining room. So anyway, that carpet ended up getting torn out so we could see the hardwood floors and ditched the bird blood.
We're going to get Julie to tell another story because there's another funny one. This is back when we were brand new agents, and I'll set you up so you'll remember. When she was showing, and remember we had a whole crap ton of cats, right? So, pun intended, by the way. So she was showing property. Do you remember which one I'm talking about? About
the cats?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was showing first-time buyers. I was showing them, sometimes we'd show together. This was by myself. And I remember the house was on West North Broadway. And it was a 2-story house that the seller had put little sticky notes by every door, okay, that said, don't let the cats out, right? And we had cats, we love cats. And I wanted to be sensitive to that. Don't let the cats out. Obviously, they're inside cats. So I do the showing. House wasn't for the buyers. We're locking up. I go through the downstairs, had an outdoor, a screened-in porch, and more sticky notes, right? So I see these cats that are walking out the screened-in door, 2 or 3 of them. I catch all of them, because I'm worried about the inside cats getting out, sticky notes everywhere.
And you found a fat one that was outside of the screened in
I
porch.
did. I figured this was their cat. The buyers had gone out in front of me.
So before you finish your story,
Yeah.
So I want you to visualize Julie Harris going around catching every damn cat
In the backyard.
In the backyard,
the screened-in
because
porch.
she didn't know which ones belonged to the house. You guys seeing where we're going with this?
Yeah, so I capture all the cats, throw them in the house, lock up, lockbox, done. Okay. A couple hours later, I get an irate phone call
From the listing
from
agent.
the listing agent saying that her seller was just absolutely livid. Why is that? I mean, I was super careful, right? What did we do wrong?
She didn't let any cats out. That's for damn
I
sure.
definitely didn't let them out. She said those cats that you let in were the neighborhood cats, and they beat the crap out of the cats that are actually belonging there. I'm like, I'm sorry, I was trying to do the right thing. So yeah. It's
Okay.
funny. You do remember those houses.
We did sell real estate. You can tell.
Okay, number 5, Ghoulish Decor. Neon green walls, or the one I hear the most is like black walls or something like that. Customized polka dot ceilings, living room designed like a vampire's lair. Nothing like extreme decor to scare away the faint of heart. Sometimes they call that very specific decor, if you know what I mean. So, spooky scenario. Welcome to your new home, you say, as your buyers step into a blood red kitchen with black and white checkered floors, or fill in the blank. You guys have all seen these. Trick or treat tip: tone down the Dracula decor. Neutral, calming colors do work best unless you're selling a castle in Transylvania. Do you know there's 2 or 3 websites dedicated to the worst real estate pictures?
So let's tell 2 stories with that one. So we are listing a house in Muirfield Country Club. Those of you guys in Central Ohio.
I remember this one too.
And this was built in the 70s. Okay, so this house was vacant. It was an expired listing. We loved expired listings. And we were walking through this house, and every inch of this house was 1970s. And this was in the 1990s. And this thing needed remodeled in a bad way. So we go to the basement. It's kind of like what you'd expect a normal basement. But then we find this room that's hidden. Remember, this is an expired listing. There was a room that was hidden behind a panel. And I don't remember how we knew it was there. Maybe somebody tipped us off it was there or whatever. We opened this room, and inside this room was red shag carpet. And there was a sound insulation, like, what's it called? Whereas
Like
if you're in there, no one can hear that there's anything going on inside this room.
Yeah.
It's that sound deadening, and red shag carpet on the walls, on the ceiling, on the floor.
Also, red lights in the ceiling, if I recall.
And exactly. Hidden behind a clothes. Okay, so this is a house that we're supposed to sell. Okay.
I wonder why it didn't sell.
How are we going to write about that in the home brochure? You guys getting what I'm getting at here? Yeah. What are you supposed to sell? But I'll tell you another one. So this was a listing agent in Beverly Hills, and he was a coaching client. He called me up, and he was going to go list a very famous actor's house. In this very famous actor's house, his first name happens to be Charlie. You guys will remember him maybe from a few years ago. Anyway, so he had this mansion that he wanted to sell, and guess what the challenge was? A dungeon in the basement. Now, houses in California don't have basements at all, but they sure as hell don't have dungeons. And this was another behind a bookshelf, closed off room. But this dungeon wasn't just red shag carpet and red lights. This was a dungeon like something you'd seen in Game of Thrones. Obviously, some sort of crazy sex room. And again, how the hell do we move past this for the sake of finding, say, a nice normal family that wants to buy the house, and all of a sudden they see the dungeon and that turns them off? I mean, see, these are all the things.
These are real stories, all of them.
When you become a successful listing agent, you're going to have to learn how to counsel the seller, how to position the house correctly in the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectations.
Yes.
And it turns out dungeons and like that, it's going to appeal to a certain subset of a subset of a subset of the buying market, but probably not going to be looking at a house for $8 million in that case.
Probably not. Okay. So, number 6, Overgrown Yard, haunted looking grounds. An overgrown, neglected yard with weeds taller than tombstones can make any house look like it's been abandoned for centuries. Throw in some broken statues, creepy lighting, and your buyers will be convinced it's haunted. Spooky scenario: the buyer steps outside and gets lost in the jungle of weeds while being stared down by a broken garden gnome missing an eye. Trick or treat tip: clean up the haunted yard. A little landscaping can turn a haunted mansion into a charming abode. Now, one of the as I was writing this, I was getting ideas and reminding myself of all these stories. One of the pictures I saw on one of those sites was a pool that was so, we were used to talking about don't let the pool go green, stuff like that. I saw a picture where not only had it gone green, but it had been that nasty for so long that there were weeds growing on top of the floating green water.
Okay, we can do better than that. back during the housing crash, Julie and I were doing, we're the largest trainers of agents teaching them how to do short sales. And then we got into the training for the REO space. I mean, this was obviously back in 2007, 2008. But we had our REO agents, part of when you're an REO agent, you go out and do an inspection on the property before, and sometimes it could be a year in advance. In Florida, it would be unusual, but not unheard of, for there to be alligators in the pool that had been there for like a year because the house had been vacant for that long.
Yep.
And sure enough, there are people that specialize in removing alligators from people's backyard pools.
Kind of a turnoff during a showing, I'm just saying. Yeah. Real stories, guys. All right, number 7, the ghostly seller hanging around during showings. Nothing creeps buyers out more than the seller lurking in the shadows during a showing. Whether they're silently watching or making awkward comments, nothing like having a ghost that won't leave the house. Here's your scenario. Your buyer walks through the home only to find the seller appearing around every corner with, "Oh, did you know the plumbing was replaced in 1987? Okay, so top tip. Sellers disappear during showings. Give buyers the space to explore without feeling haunted by your presence.
Now, unfortunately, there's a digital version of that. It's with the cameras that people put in their houses.
Yep.
And you got to remember or remind your buyers to, if they, assume that they're being watched at all times. So why is that important? Because they don't want to be talking crap about somebody's house. That's just bad. And especially you don't want to be saying anything bad. But the opposite's true as well. If they're really enthusiastic about the house and they're showing their cards because the seller is watching and listening to them behind hidden cameras, then the buyer is going to be at a disadvantage when they go to write a competitive offer on the property, because the seller's already going to know they really want the house. You guys get it? So one of the rules when we're working with buyers and walking through a house is say nothing, write notes down, do things like that, but just assume you're being watched.
Yes, which you can't really prevent. So number 8. Too much or too weird furniture, a decor nightmare. When your home is overstuffed or your listing is overstuffed with too much furniture or just plain weird pieces, buyers might feel like they've wandered into a haunted museum. That giant beanbag chair in the middle of the dining room, it's more frightening than it is functional. So your spooky scenario, buyer stumbles through a maze of antique armchairs, lava lamps, a couch shaped like a giant shoe, or whatever you guys have seen. Trick or treat tip, declutter and stage the home so it feels spacious and inviting, not like a haunted fun house.
It's always too much furniture. It's never not enough furniture.
Ever.
Yeah. Well, so I can encapsulate 2 points. Julie and I, again, worked with a lot of expireds. One of the reasons that expire is because guess what? The condition, right? So it's price, condition, or location. And so a lot of times the location would be great, the price would be great, but the condition would be a nightmare. And the seller was the problem. And so we had a plan. We didn't actually tell the seller this, but we called it remove the homeowner.
And their stuff.
Right, and their stuff. So if you have an unsellable house and a motivated seller, you've got to have the seller move on to whatever they're planning on moving to next. And you've got to get rid of all their crap and make the house appear as plain Jane as possible. If it's an upper end home, you might want to stage it. But removing the homeowner is sometimes the only thing you're going to do to get the home sold. The alternative for that seller is going to be selling it at a huge discount to overcome the condition. So that's how you present it to the seller. Mr. Seller, if you want to wholesale the house right now, I have an investor that will, say the house is worth $1 million. I have an investor that will probably come in here and offer you $800, maybe $750. Or if we do these things, you move to your next house, we have an auction, we get the things removed, we position it correctly, and then we can sell it for $1 million. You tell me what you would prefer. And I'll tell you guys the punchline that will really surprise you. Almost every single time, the seller is going to elect to take the lesser price and not have to deal with any of the hassle of getting the property conditioned to put it for sale. Do not go into a listing presentation or talking to a seller assuming that price is the most important thing to them. That's a rookie mistake. Always convenience is the most important to a seller, except if they're, for example, a builder or a flipper or something like that. Most people would rather take less and take less net and have a less hassle. And that's an odd but true fact.
That's
Point number
true.
9, Julie.
All right. Number 9, the backyard horror. Dog, chicken, or horse poo. What's worse than a creepy yard? A yard filled with, let's just say, surprises. Whether it's dog poo, chicken droppings, or even a horse's calling card, stepping and something foul will definitely scare buyers away. Your spooky scenario is a buyer strolls in the backyard only to hear the squish beneath their shoe, a smelly, spooky surprise they won't forget. Your trick-or-treat tip, clean up the backyard before showings. The only thing worse than an eerie yard is a messy one that leaves buyers with an unpleasant souvenir.
It's interesting you left today's podcast with the point number 9 being about poop. I don't know what your mind's at. But so listen, these points are meant to be funny and fun. You can share these with your, obviously, share them with whomever you want to. But I can see you guys having a lot of creative impetus to use this on social, kind of giving a seller a seasonal suggestion list of things not to do and trying to put a house for sale.
Hint.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And by the way, I collect these stories from coaching clients and coaches in our own. I've got a folder of our own stories. We didn't even touch on half of them. So I am giving you a shout out. My email is julie@timandjulieharris.com. Send me your spooky showing scenarios. The coaches have sent a couple to me. Coach Rochelle sent me one where she was showing a house and there was a cat that wouldn't leave them alone, to the point where her buyer couple actually had to jump up on the kitchen island to get away from this cat. And the cat attached itself to Rochelle because she wasn't jumping up there with them. And she didn't tell me how she actually got out of that scenario. But please share your stories with me. Another coach, our coach in training, Ken, was talking about how he was trying to overcome the objection during a showing that was overlooking a cemetery. And they were actually on the top floor. And the buyer was like, gosh, it really is quiet, like creepily quiet. So some of the scripts he was using there. But please do send me your stories because I love to collect these. And one day I plan on writing, remember the Chicken Soup for the Soul series?
Yes.
I want to do a chicken soup for the realtor soul because everybody just thinks that it's all, open houses and taking your check to the bank, and they forget about all of these different things that we all deal with all the time.
Well, what's funny too is I'm thinking of the new agent listening.
Yeah.
Probably a third of all of our listeners are, fresh licensees that they're going to get licensed.
Yep.
And they must be thinking twice about their decision to become a real estate agent.
Probably. That was not my intention with this.
But you know what? Stuff like this that makes,
fine.
business fun. The longer you're in the business, the more you have these little, war stories. It's always fun to share with a friend over a glass of Chardonnay or whatever. But guys, at the end of the day, you have to be half Dr. Phil, and half, I don't even know what the other half is. But a lot of being successful in real estate is dealing with the psychology of your buyers and your sellers. And hopefully some of this will, enlighten you on some of the experiences you've yet to have, or maybe you've had in the past, and you can kind of, write those off in a humorous way and share those with Julie. And her email address is julie@timandjulieharris.com. And we'll start sharing some of these stories on our podcast.
And by the way, all the ones that we mentioned, the house is sold. With the exception, I don't know about the one where I put the wrong cats in the house because that wasn't our listing. But I think all of the other ones that we talked about, they did all eventually sell.
Yeah.
So, fear not, listeners, they will actually get gone. So I hope you guys had fun with this. Please send me your stories as well. Maybe I'll feature you on a future podcast about what not to do with showings. So get to work. Hope you guys had fun. Have a great weekend.